Charleston or beyond
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It
Cool.
was originally a Ford Motor Company plant in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Anyway, it's interesting.
One of my
So
best
I'm in a
friends
phone
has
booth.
one of my best friends has a photography studio there. Tent Studios. So you got to go check it out.
I will check it out. There's a lot of stuff here.
Mm-hmm. It's a cool place.
Yeah.
Eric, is that near the place where the trolley has been put back in Charlotte? Do you know?
No, I was just looking at it.
Yeah, it's a little far out of downtown.
This trolley from South End, so the southern part.
Mm-hmm.
Is it along the rail line, the light rail line here?
It's not, but it's a short drive from it.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
We did a light rail tour this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Are you doing that for your foundation you're working with, or
yeah, we're looking at the arts. They have a whole art studio situation here, residency in an old Goodyear tire plant.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, it's interesting.
Well, you won't have to worry about outside distractions in your little room.
No, in my little phone booth.
Chloe, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Coming through clear, Charlie.
Good. Okay, if y'all are ready, we'll go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to this special meeting of the City of Charleston Planning Commission. My name is Charlie Carish. I'm the chairman of the commission. And so everyone knows, the members of the commission are appointed by Charleston City Council. They're volunteers, and I know you join me in thanking them for their work. For the record, I'll read the members. Chloe, let me ask you, well, I'll read the members who are in the commission, and then you'll let me know who may not be attending. Mr. Jimmy Bailey, Ms. Laquita Bryant Jenkins, Ms. Erica Harrison, Ms. Donna Jacobs, Ms. Angie Johnson, Ms. Sunday Lempers, our vice chairman, Mr. Harry Lassane, Mr. Sean Flug, and myself. This is a special meeting, so we'll be talking about the city plan. And again, I want to go on record, as we've done before, and thanking the city planning staff for their many, many hours and weeks, probably months of work on this. This only happens once every 10 years. So I know they really worked very hard on this, and we appreciate it. I'd also like to thank commission members, because we've had one other meeting on this, and we asked commission members, we tabled any motions, or we wanted to bring forward recommendations, so we get it 100% right before we send it to city council. I want to thank commission members for their input and feedback on this so that we can discuss today. So what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Mr. Chris Morgan. He'll let anyone know, members of his staff that will be participating in the meeting tonight, and introduce them. Then we will have the presentation. Then we'll have public comment. Then we'll close the public aspect of the meeting, and we'll have questions, comments of commission members, and any motions. So, Mr. Morgan, that being said, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and so happy to be here. And I think at the culmination of what's been a really long but very productive process with you all on this comprehensive plan. I don't know that in my time with the Planning Commission, we've never had as intensive a project as this one, working with you all on a document and all like that. So I'm really proud of what we've put together over the last 18 months or so. And I think it was good to have another couple of weeks to kind of digest some stuff and let you all throw in some other ideas that you had. And we'll be going over those tonight. Staff with us tonight is, of course, they are the rock stars. They're the ones who have written this plan and done such a great job with it. We have Chloe Stuber, Eric Pullman, Jim Hemphill, and Philip Overcash. We also, Marcy's somewhere out there, our clerk, right, Chloe? She's not on the Hollywood Square.
She's going to catch us on YouTube later. She is double booked tonight, clerking.
Okay. But yeah, so, you know, unless you all have other things you want to go through, I see Sunday's joining in now too. We were going to go straight to the recommendations, because it seemed like that's where you all had the things you wanted to work on. And we will show you where we have brought in the items that you all have sent us over the last week or 2 weeks, and see what you think about those and have comment and discussion. And if other things come up, we can certainly discuss other aspects of the plan if you all want to. I know that we also have some comments from the public, and I think typically you all like to hear from speakers and things, and we've got some speakers signed up. So of course we would have that aspect today as well. Without further ado, I'm going to go to screen share here and get to the items. If this is going to come up. Here we go. Are you all seeing the Charleston City Plan recommendations? Is that
Yes,
showing
sir.
up for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me get to my view and I'll get full screen and just make it a little bit neater. Where is full screen? Oh, there we go. All right, look at that. Okay, so in the first section of the plan, of course, that was the engagement section. And we had some comments. Looking down, everything that is new comments or changes is in blue. Hope that's showing up as blue for all of you. On number 5, we had develop strategies to ensure transparency and accountability for implementation of plan recommendations. And now the addition has added including a methodology to communicate progress for recommendations put forth in all sections of the city plan. And that might sound a little bit Greek to a lot of folks, but what we see that in the planning department as is giving regular reports to you and the public on how we are working on getting the recommendations of the plan done, and having regular update sessions for prioritization from you all, and just kind of updates on how we're doing on the whole thing. And then number 6 was a new one to continue to research and diversify data sources to be data smart, thus supporting staff when formulating policy, processes, and ordinance development. So we've got those. Any comments here? Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay.
Christopher,
Yes.
the things in blue, these are the requests made by commission members to be added.
Yes.
Will you, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you get to one that, are you going to comment whether or not something gives you heartburn or not?
Yeah, we'll give our thoughts on all of them. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move on now into natural resources. And in number 5, we have create incentives for the use of conservation easements, including developing a toolkit for green space preservation. And then in number 7, we added some more to this. I'll just read the whole recommendation. It says, continue to promote planning and zoning policies that align with the living with water approach outlined in the Dutch Dialogues Charleston study, including encouraging the use of green infrastructure. And we've added in landscaping practices and stormwater management. Green infrastructure includes features such as bioswales, porous pavements, rain gardens, and wetland buffers, and other practices that leave existing natural features and ecosystems undisturbed. So seems like makes a lot of sense on our end. So comments? Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. Cultural resources. And had a couple in here under number 7. So the old recommendation, increase the amount of markers and monuments documenting sites and key figures culturally and historically significant to Charleston's African American and other underrepresented communities. So a slight change to that. Then on number 10, conduct a new historic resources survey for all appropriate parts of the city, especially the Upper Peninsula. We'd had another number of organizations commenting on the need for historic resources survey for the Upper Peninsula. We know that there's some other parts of our historic surveys that we have at the city. Sorry about that. That we have at the city that need some updating as well. But we had specifically called out by several organizations the Upper Peninsula. And then number 12, reevaluate the feasibility of an archaeological ordinance for the city. And there, that was suggested by one of you all. I think it was Ms. Jacobs, and I know it's been suggested by a number of organizations. And, it's something that could be done. It's just going to have some costs, and some pretty substantial costs, because the only way we have found through our research around the country to have an archaeological ordinance is to have a on-site, on payroll archaeologist. And it has the potential to, create an extra hurdle on some redevelopment projects, or taking, some buildings that, and sites that may be in need of redevelopment, and it does just add an extra step. And that's the thing, we just have to look at the balance. Are we gaining a lot through the extra history we learn about the site and other significant things we find underneath the ground that we might not have known were there, versus, what it takes in time and cost to the city for the archaeological component to be part of our ordinances. So, all right, I'm not seeing anybody stopping me, so I'm going to move forward. Okay, in economic development, this one has kind of been tweaked a couple of different times, but the way number 2 now reads is dedicate staff and resources, i.e. an Office of Economic Development, to create targeted goals for each area of the city and work with corresponding economic development offices in Charleston and Berkeley counties to unify approaches to regional economic development. Clearly, we've been hearing this from a lot of folks that they would like the city to do more from an economic development standpoint. We do have our existing Office of Business Services, and they also do neighborhood services as well. We were trying to, keep from this plan specifically calling for other positions within the city government. We can study it and all like that, but not trying to be a kind of 30,000 foot level thing and not say specifically, oh, we need another position here. And so it's kind of been soft pedaled a little bit, but we have heard this from a number of different sources. Then number 5, pursue policies and programs to support independent, locally owned businesses and allow for competition with larger national chains, including creating programs or incentives for preserving legacy businesses and affordable commercial properties. And this edition, and providing targeted support to navigate the city's licensing and permitting processes. Again, this could be a cost. It could involve some extra staff, but we aren't specifically saying staff. It may be that some things can be moved around, but this was something we heard on several different levels as well. Okay, not seeing anybody raising a hand or anything. Okay.
I don't know how we're going to do this, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to wait to the end or jump in now, whatever.
I think if you have a question, we're going to get public participation, but if you have a question on any aspect of recommendation, go ahead and ask now. That'd be fine, Mr. Bailey.
Well, I mean, as an example, number 12, I sensed a little hesitancy just based on the possibility of cost, but the way that's written, that's not a we shall do this kind of statement. That's a look into it kind of statement. Are any of these a definitive we shall? Because if it's just to look at the feasibility of these things, I don't see what's wrong with that.
I agree with you, Mr. Bailey, personally, because I think to reevaluate doesn't mean you're spending money. If the money's there, certainly the city can do it. But as you said, that's going to pertain to if there's dollars to do that. So I agree with you. Anybody else have any input on that?
Well, and I think that we ought to discuss these individually before we vote on them. But I think as a general rule, precisely what y'all are saying, asking the city to evaluate something is a different thing than saying, as in number 2, dedicate staff and resources to create blah, blah, blah. I mean, I think that's a little more prescriptive sounding to me.
I agree with you. So maybe, go ahead.
Sorry, Charlie. I think if we're consistent with the wording, so far it's a little bit inconsistent. So I think if perhaps we could just use the same wording when we're just evaluating or when we're just looking at it, because then it leaves the kind of open to interpretation if it's worded differently and people could interpret it differently. So I would just say not a big change, but just to use the same wording when we're just evaluating or recommending an evaluation.
Makes sense. Anyone else? So again, I think Harry has a good point. Mr. Bailey has good points. Maybe we should, as we go through, if any commission member has a question or concern as we go through them, that probably would be the best way. So, and we can go backwards, but let's go ahead and go forward, and then we can go back to anything we covered. Anything else on this one? To me, this sounds reasonable because it doesn't say we shall or they will implement, just says we'll evaluate it. So if nothing else, Mr. Morgan, you want to move forward?
Okay. Number 8, relax development requirements such as parking thresholds or licensing for neighborhood scale retail and restaurants and it's been specified to say in areas designated as city centers, neighborhood edge, and certain neighborhood areas to encourage a mixture of uses in neighborhoods.
Any feedback on that? Okay, thank you. Mr. Morgan?
14, we had crossed through pursue strategies to promote a diversified economy that provides a variety of jobs, and then replaced it with develop policies, programs, tools, and resources to attract and recruit a racially diverse workforce in the city of Charleston and to promote an economy that provides a variety of jobs paying living wages.
Any feedback? I think that's worded a little bit more detailed and maybe makes sense. So any other feedback?
Okay.
Not, Mr. Morgan?
Okay, number 16, and we've heard about number 16 from both planning commissioners and some organizations in town, but establish a task force to update the city's tourism management plan in a manner that will improve livability for Charleston citizens while recognizing the importance and economic impact of tourism.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Okay.
Anyone on that item? Makes sense. Thank you. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, then under transportation, just one change on number 16, where new pedestrian pathways are being considered, promote policies that encourage wider multi-use paths. In areas where there are existing pathways, promote widening where feasible. And I think this stems from the discussion you all had in Planning Commission a month or so ago about a 5-foot wide sidewalk, which is currently required, and the ability to maybe get that up to 8 or 10 feet, which really helps to make for the multi-use paths when you get to that width. And currently our ordinances don't require that except along Folly Road. But I think we are certainly supportive of that from a staff standpoint.
Yeah, and we talked about that. And I think Ms. Jacobs had that point, and it made sense where it's feasible. Sometimes there's not land to do it. There's no right of way to do it, things like that. Anyone input on that item?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Ms. Jacobs.
My only question to staff is, because I know that, the wording of these things is very important. I know Charleston Moves at the previous meeting put forth 2 recommended additions, they said, to the transportation element of the plan. And I was just wondering how that was used in the crafting of number 16. Because these things were very wordy, and I just didn't know how the 2 reflect with each other.
And I'm going to turn to Chloe because I know she was doing some editing and pulling some of that together. Chloe, can you help with a response on that?
So what I understood, what Charleston Moves shared was the statements made, and the public comment was basically a sort of copy and paste of statements that were made the last Planning Commission meeting and weren't necessarily wording for recommendations. And this wording was suggested by Commissioner Bailey in response to those comments made. And other comments made by Charleston Moves some of those were addressed not in recommendation form, but by making sure that we've referenced the SCDOT directive in the narrative of the plan document, as well as the walk, bike, Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester plan in the narrative section or the narrative portion of the transportation element. And so both of those have been added and are in the most recent version available on the city plan website.
Okay, because I was looking for that in the most recent plan. And you don't have to do this right now. If you could just tell me the page where that narrative was incorporated, I'd greatly appreciate it.
And I believe that the language there in 16 is word for word what I suggested. And I think it represents the spirit of what I was trying to accomplish, but I have no pride of authorship and would gladly take suggestions on additions or changes.
I mean, I personally like the wording. I just want to make sure it reflects, some of the things that they were suggesting, because I think they're important.
I like the wording as well. Anyone else input on that?
I like the wording as well. One of the things I think I had sent, and this might have been a while ago, is with the pedestrian pathways and the bike pathways. I know gosh, it was many years ago. And I think this is actually in the plan somewhere, but when we're specifically calling it out here, is making sure that there is that adequate, I don't know the wording for it. I don't know if it's a barrier or spacing between the vehicle traffic and the walkways. And I know that's something that encourages people to walk and ride bikes when there is some sort of whether it's trees or grass, as opposed to the pedestrian pathways being right up on the road near the cars. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be addressed here, but I just want to bring it up.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Anyone else?
I might interject on this just from a staff standpoint.
Yes, sir, Mr. Morgan.
Absolutely. We know about that need for separation from the vehicle areas, and the wording here, I think, allows for that, because it's saying that, if you've got the room, you can make the path wider, but we don't want to get the paths like just to be flush with the curb, that kind of thing in all instances, because that isn't as safe as getting them further away. Absolutely.
That's exactly what I was asking for. So that's great.
Ms. Lumpus has her hand raised.
Yeah, Mr. Lassane, you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I would like to add, I think this is all excellent. I would like to add that, I believe the best practice is not only to separate the paths from vehicular traffic, but to also separate the pedestrian from the bicycle paths. So, again, where feasible, to separate, the multi-use paths could contain. If we're gonna go to the point of saying all this in this plan at this level of detail, let's say what the best practice is.
Maybe we could say on there, safe and adequate for both pedestrians and bicyclists. I don't know.
And separated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Morgan?
The national model that's advocated by different advocacy organizations is, typically up to 12 feet. Sometimes they can be as narrow as 8 feet, but 12 feet provides the best ability to separate from, bicyclists from pedestrians. And I think that's the type thing we'd like to have if there's enough room. For instance, the Folly Road overlay that we have now calls for 12 feet on both sides of Folly Road. However, we've got some constraints in certain areas of Folly Road. We're trying to get to 12 feet in almost all instances, but there are sometimes some constraints, and sometimes the width of the path is less important than, like Angie was saying, getting it away from the moving traffic. And that's a really high priority, is getting away from the moving traffic. And sometimes we sacrifice a little bit of that to get it away. But anyway.
And I'll just jump in. I think of the low line as well, where that will be used by bicycle commuters, which separating them from pedestrians, I think, is a wise thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Sane. Anyone else? So I think we're
Ms.
all.
Lumpus has her hand raised.
Who is that?
Ms. Lumpus has her.
Go ahead,
hand raised.
Sunday. Sunday, you go ahead. You've been quiet, so I better go ahead.
I have one question and actually a point to maybe add in that number 16. Can we, we're adding on more and more to an already cumbersome and stringent application process for anybody coming to the city plan. Could we maybe add a word in there that says promote and incentivize on policies for wider multi-use paths, instead of just adding an entirely, and I'm 100% for the wider paths, but I think that there needs to be some sort of incentive in there to promote and encourage that, and really you have to follow it. But and I don't know where you're going to widen it where feasible, because I don't know that anybody that's going to come off the money in order to widen existing already, unless the city plans on doing that, or the state. So I'd like to maybe add that word and incentivize. And also I have a question. Nowhere under transportation is there ever mentioned, and it's really a question for the city. Has anybody ever, do y'all talk about high-speed transportation in any of your meetings?
You mean mass transit or just single?
Yeah, mass transit, high-speed transit, just to try to eliminate some of this traffic. I mean, is that anywhere in the discussion in the transportation department or with the intra-governmental agencies?
So
is anybody even? talking about that?
Being pursued right now. There were a variety of strategies that were studied to help with the congestion in I-26. And light rail was studied, commuter rail has been studied. Neither of those were as effective given our densities and the traffic issues we have in our region as the concept of bus rapid transit. And that was viewed as the most economically feasible and having the ability to move the greatest number of folks in our environment. And so that's why that was moved forward. It's funded through the half-cent sales tax. Hopefully it will get the federal funding that they're working to get. And with all that, it would be, implemented as a kind of parallel route to I-26 from almost all the way to Somerville, essentially into downtown Charleston. So that's been a thing that's been studied. I mean, we haven't looked, at like high-speed rail, for example, like high-speed rail to Columbia or Atlanta or whatever it might be. I don't know, that would kind of be a state level thing, be fantastic. But in this region, the only thing.
No, Christopher, I wasn't talking about to Columbia. I was really just talking about to Somerville, to Monk's Corner, for the medical. I drive back and forth a lot on the interstate, and I-26 traffic with one car wreck is just crazy. So if you're telling me that your proposal with the rapid transit works, and that has been decided more than a high speed between the two, the surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding communities, then that suits me. Thank you.
It's not a city proposal. This was kind of regionally arrived at through the Council of Governments, but yes.
Thank you, Ms. Lepsis. One of the things, this word incentivize, I don't know, Mr. Morgan, I don't know, we can say to encourage incentivize, but I don't know if we can say that there's incentives out there for this. Mr. Morgan, does that make better sense to you? I don't know, maybe I'm missing something.
Possible, because it might be that, let's say you've got a neighborhood that's being built for sake of argument. It's on Bees Ferry. Well, it's on a road that doesn't have a bike ped facility on it right now. So if the developer is willing to put in a very nice bike ped facility across the front of it on the main kind of collector road, maybe there's some things within the neighborhood itself where not as many people walk that could be reduced, that kind of thing, in exchange for them building the facility where the most people would be walking, which is along the linear collector route. So I think there's some value to that. I mean, I think from a staff standpoint, we wouldn't have any problem putting some wording in there like that.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is on Mr. Lassane's comments that the separation of that we talked about of the past, the bicycle pedestrian, if we can include that, as well as the possibly incentivize people if possible to promote these ideas. Are we hearing anything else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Jacobs.
I'm going to support Mr. Lassane and his concept. And sometimes it's just as simple as two different brick styles, because that's routinely used all over Europe. And you know that if you're on the gray brick, you're a bike, or on the red brick, you're a pedestrian. And it's just a slight design on the sidewalk. It's not any big physical development. So there are simple designs to make those separations within the path. And I agree with Ms. Johnson about the separation from the traffic is also very critical. So thank you.
So we okay with those changes on number 16?
Got those noted.
Yes, I have those noted. And also, Donna, to your earlier question, the changes to the narrative are on page 65 and page 67 in the most recent version of the plan.
Thank you, Chloe. Anything else on number 16? If not, Mr. Morgan.
All right, so this is in the community facilities and priority investment area, a new recommendation that says research and evaluate the efficiency of capital projects development and the maintenance of existing facilities. It's a little bit of a open-ended one. I think the commissioner who recommended it, maybe she might want to explain a little bit on that, and let you all have the discussion on that one.
Anyone?
Are you calling on me, Christopher?
Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead. We're calling on you.
It was not generated by staff.
No, maybe you could clarify this for everyone. That's all.
Yeah.
Well, the clarification is that it's the community engagement during this process was parks was every third word out of everyone's mouth. And we are in the process right now of doing a parks master plan for the city of Charleston. If you look very carefully at the Department of Parks and Recreation, you find out that they do everything from building the forensic labs to changing the light bulbs in City Hall to building our parks and our recreational facilities. And I think our city has just grown to the fact that we might need to think about how that might be better laid out in the city more efficiently. And the example is when stormwater department was pulled from public services in order to make a very focused look at stormwater and stormwater maintenance and stormwater management within the city because of the problem with stormwater. So I think it might be time for us to look at that department that it may have, because the city has grown and there's a lot of requirements for capital projects, the maintenance of our capital projects, the development of our parks. We just might want to look at how that department is structured and evaluated so that we don't get bogged down in, providing these sorts of facilities and parks that the public is anxiously asking for during the city plan. And that was advised that I made that as sort of vague as possible so it didn't sound very specific, because it is once again just an evaluation, because we've grown and we need these services for the public.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. But I tell you, and I have no issue with those being in there, but the way I read it, without that in there, it would still pertain to those areas. You said in areas designated as city centers, neighborhood edge, and certain neighborhood areas. If that wasn't in there, those things could still be relaxed development requirements because they wouldn't include it at all as all. Am I reading that correctly, Chris? They would still be included anyway if they weren't specifically designated that way.
Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah, Charlie, I think we were talking about number 9.
Oh, I apologize. Okay.
I was talking
Page
about
6.
Page 6.
I apologize. I'm wrong.
No.
Sorry. I went off. Sorry.
I wasn't talking about land use, so I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm sorry. Never mind.
Mr. Chairman, I have a process question.
Yes, sir.
I believe that the commission should have staff present the proposed changes, have the public comment, and then the commission should debate and approve or disapprove what's been proposed. I really believe that this sort of ad hoc, discuss some and don't discuss others. I'd like to get through the discussion by presentation by staff, hear from the public, and then I think the commission can weigh in on each individual item.
I second that thought process.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll do it that way. We'll just keep moving through then. I have no issue with that. I just thought there was someone that said they wanted to comment on a particular one. If there's a question, we'll stop. So, Mr. Morgan, you go ahead.
I apologize. I got Ms. Jacobs to give her background on that one. So, yeah. Okay. So, all right. So we'll go on to the housing area, and on number 2, we have a slight change: strongly encourage and create incentives for diversity of housing types within neighborhoods, citywide, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Then we'll go on to the next page. Okay, these are still under housing. Number 7, develop strategies for preserving existing affordable housing set to expire. That would be tax credit type housing, things like that, and naturally occurring affordable housing units throughout the city. Then number 8, expand the partnership with the Charleston Redevelopment Corporation, the Palmetto Community Land Trust, and establish a land bank for future affordable housing development. And then in number 10, additions of allocate dedicated resources and staff to assist lower income homeowners and African-American owners of historic homes to retain, reinvest, and redevelop their properties to increase the amount of naturally occurring affordable housing stock. And we removed a few words from this to reword it this way.
Thank you, sir. You go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well,
Ms. Limpis has raised her hand.
Sunday,
I'm skipping ahead real quick, but I just wondered, Christopher, if y'all could just maybe add workforce housing in addition to affordable housing throughout this entire section. Workforce housing is a little bit different than affordable housing, and I think we are in direct both.
If I could speak to that quickly, we've defined affordable housing in the city plan as including low income through workforce housing. So that is part of this recommendation, and any reference to the word affordable housing in the plan, anywhere it's stated, is including both workforce housing and low income housing.
And I think, Chloe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think throughout our city organization, when we now refer to affordable housing, that includes workforce housing. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chloe.
Thank you all. Mr. Morgan, you go ahead.
Okay. So in land use area now, one addition, and that is continue research and outreach efforts with African-American settlement communities to ensure future development and land use recommendations are in concert with communities' goals. Then in our final section, the equity and resilience section, we have change. We've removed a sentence and instead stated to update the downtown plan to fully implement recommendations from various plans and studies that address flood protection, new development and redevelopment, and tourism management. And again, this is some things we've heard from a variety of different sources that have led to this change in the equity and resilience item. And then one final one here, number 12. Continue to study the effects of extreme heat and pursue policies that protect people in all areas of the city from extreme heat, especially lower income and elderly community members who may have more limited ability to adapt. And this came from our Chief Resilience Officer. And those are the changes.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. So we have several people who have signed up to speak, as well as written comments. Chloe, I guess if we're starting with Mr. Zlogar, is he available?
Yes, Mr. Slogar, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Zlogar. We're ready when you are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, this is John Zlogar with the Johns Island Task Force. First of all, I'd like to really thank staff for all the effort they put into this, especially relative to the elevation-based efforts they're doing and also reaffirming the urban growth boundary. But there is one area we think that could be improved in the city plan, and that's the recommended densities for the rural and low impact / conserved areas. As a way of background, the rural areas are currently zoned as conservation. This limits the density to 1 dwelling unit per 1.5 acres. But in the draft city plan before you, the density has been increased to 1 dwelling unit per 1 acre. Now, this is a significant upzoning and is not in line with the city plan support of the UGB, and the city plan definitely does a great job of supporting the UGB. Therefore, we recommend that the density for the rural area be maintained at its current level of 1 dwelling unit per 1.5 acres. And we also recommend that this density be applied to the low impact / conserved areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zlogar, for your comments and your time. Next, I think, is Mr. Winslow Hasty. Is that correct, Chloe?
Yes.
Mr. Hasty, you go ahead whenever you're ready. Looks like he's muted.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Good evening. This is Winslow Hasty with Historic Charleston Foundation. Thank you for the opportunity. We've had a lot of interaction with the city staff and with our constituents on this issue, and we appreciate the responsiveness that we've gotten from the planning staff. We're very excited about this document. We think it presents a bold vision for the next 10 years. We in particular are very excited about the commitment to the Dutch Dialogue's Charleston report, the commitment to affordable, attainable housing, as well as a continued focus on Charleston's historic and cultural resources. We also want to just say that a lot of our recommendations that we put forth have been incorporated, and we very much appreciate that. We want to thank the city staff and the Planning Commission for that. We do have one concern that we want to bring forth that is sort of, we just noticed fairly recently when we were looking at the land use map for the peninsula. It's in the land use section. In the land use map for the peninsula, it's on page 112, at least in the June 9th version. And we're concerned about the fact that what is now being termed city center it used to be called, I think, urban core, but it's now termed city center in this new document. Has the boundaries of that have changed pretty significantly, and so it is being taken away from all the areas downtown south of Market Street. So King, Meeting Streets, and Broad Street have all been removed from what used to be called urban core, now city center category, and now designates, I think, those areas as neighborhood. And we have very significant concerns about, you think of the four corners of law and City Hall and the judicial complex, the federal courthouse, all these really important civic uses, as well as commercial businesses that are line Meeting, Broad, and King Streets. And to take them out of the city center, we think is a huge philosophical shift from the way the city has thought about downtown Charleston. And we just are very concerned about that designation changing so dramatically, and really think that merits restudy, and hopefully will re-extend city center down to those traditional, the sort of civic heart of downtown Charleston. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hasty. We appreciate your work and your time. Next, we have Mr. James Wilson. Chloe, is Mr. Wilson available?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is James Wilson with Womble Bond Dickinson. First, very much want to thank the city planning staff for taking the time to talk with us about our concerns and frankly help us understand the comprehensive plan better. And so very much appreciate that. As we have, and I apologize, I'm speaking on behalf of the owners of the Canewood property this evening. As we've expressed before, of course, the Canewood property has in place existing PUD zoning and development agreements that are going to guide growth there for the next 25 years. And as we've come to get our arms around the plan better, we do believe that the plan is largely consistent with those documents. And again, appreciate staff kind of helping us better understand this. There's been some discussion about the longleaf pines on part of this property, and we just want to make sure that everyone understands that the harvesting of these pine trees has been going on for many, many years and continues, and were planted there for timber. There's also large sections of this property that have been set aside, including various buffers and a 650-acre sanctuary area for conservation. And we do think that the existing PUDs and development plans really strike a reasonable balance. And so we just wanted to make that point, let everyone know that frankly, we think the comprehensive plan, it does track generally correctly with the existing zoning, and appreciate everybody's time on these issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, for your comments and your time as well. Next, we have Anna Catherine Carroll. Is Ms. Carroll available?
Yes, thank you. This is Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We would just like to congratulate the Planning Commission and city staff on a very thoughtful and exacting review of the latest version of this draft city plan. The public process thus far and the product that's before you this evening demonstrate that community input is being taken seriously. And we're particularly encouraged to see the incorporation of specific recommendations that we asked the Commission to consider in its most recent review, including recommendations pertaining to cultural resources and economic development. And as just one example, the recommendation to establish a task force to update the tourism management plan is highly positive. Further, we're equally encouraged to see the incorporation of strong recommendations from our partner organizations like Charleston Moves, the Coastal Conservation League, and Historic Charleston Foundation. And we really appreciate the level of collaboration that we've seen throughout this process that's been going on for more than a year. Overall, we see this visioning document as foundational for establishing meaningful and unprecedented goals for equity inclusion in the city of Charleston. And we look forward to partnering with the community and city leadership to help make this vision a reality. So we thank you for your continued and thoughtful review of this critically important plan and the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll, for your comments. Appreciate it. Next, we have Savannah Brennan. Is Ms. Brennan available? Ms. Brennan, you go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Savannah Brennan, and I'm the Director of Programming for Charleston Moves. During your last special meeting on the city plan, my colleague Katie Zimmerman suggested a couple of revisions to the plan to incorporate 2 transportation items, and based on your discussion today, it sounds like they have both been incorporated. So thank you very much for that. We really appreciate it. Our specific recommendation for the city to develop formal policies to require multi-use paths aims to prevent future lost opportunities that bring much needed safety improvements with redevelopment. And fortunately, Bike Walk BCD offers excellent guidance on where this space should be prioritized. So it's great that it's referenced in this city plan alongside DOT's Complete Streets policy. Charleston Moves is very appreciative of the Planning Commission's understanding of how safe biking and walking infrastructure plays a major role in developing a livable and enjoyable city. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan, for your comments and y'all's organization's work. Thank you. Next, we have Betsy LaForce. Is Ms. LaForce available?
Yes, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you again. This is Betsy LaForce with the Coastal Conservation League. We appreciate and echo all the appreciations to the staff and planning commissioners for incorporating much of the feedback the Conservation League has shared over the course of this expertly led process. We appreciate also the thorough review by the planning commissioners and the extra work and additional meeting put in to send this draft to City Council with meaningful recommendations. This is an excellent plan with a lot of progressive content that we're really excited about. But there is one area in particular we believe still needs your attention: the proposed future land use maps for Cainhoy. Suburban zoning is slated for the majority of Upper Cainhoy north of Clements Ferry Road, an area we believe should remain rural. Cainhoy can be developed in a way that utilizes its high ground to meet the developer's purpose and need, while also preserving the important natural and cultural resources on the site that go far beyond the old growth longleaf pine that serves as habitat for federally protected red cockaded woodpeckers that Mr. Wilson referenced. The environmental impacts of harvesting timber versus clear cutting for suburban sprawl are very different. We wanted to draw to your attention that in 2019, the Conservation League and the Southern Environmental Law Center commissioned Dover Cole and Partners, the same firm who did the Plan West Ashley report, to study Cainhoy and develop concept plans that avoid the known natural and cultural resources, as well as the vast majority of the 100-year floodplain, while creating walkable mixed-use communities centered around the existing transportation infrastructure at the same density that's being proposed and is currently approved in the PUDs. We have circulated that report document widely and would be happy to share it with planning commissioners as well. Thank you, as always, for your consideration of our comments.
Thank you, Ms. LaForce, for your comments and your time as well. Chloe, we have several written comments that I'd ask you to read into the record.
Of course. Okay, we had 5 comments, all asking for the northern area of Cainhoy, Upper Clements Ferry Road to remain rural. Those were received from Kristen Karstarfen at 43 Littleton Avenue, from William Anderson, 655 Clearview Drive, David Michael at 1 Bishop Gadsden Way, Paula Brady at 12 George Street, and Lynn Hanlon at 67 Meeting Street. So all of their comments reflected that sentiment. We also received a comment from Margaret Peary, 2 comments actually from Margaret, 15 Council Street. I believe that the area of the city from Market to Broad between King and Meeting should remain a part of the city center. The designation should not be changed to neighborhood. That area should not become primarily residential. And then I've copied and pasted the Preservation Society concerns about omissions of key concepts in the plan. I agree with their concerns. In quotation marks, a vision for a culture of citizen awareness, responsibility, and action towards water management is needed, and the plan in its current form misses this opportunity. And more in-depth discussion of tourism management, including the implications for affordable housing, neighborhood serving businesses, and quality of life for Charleston residents. It's unclear why an initial recommendation to create an Office of Economic Development has been removed. We urge the city to reincorporate this provision. The city should commit to improving and expanding public green space, including its park system, by requiring greater contributions to the public realm from new developments. From LaDon Page at 886 Hunt Club Run. I would like to express my opposition to allow development on the 9,000 acres north of Clements Ferry Road. I also want to express opposition and concerns with allowing the Long Savannah project to move forward. Charleston is quickly becoming overdeveloped, leading to destruction of critical habitats and wetlands and increased flooding. This is not sustainable growth. Even the higher forests help protect us from flooding and provide ecosystems, habitats, and once they are gone, they are gone. We cannot undo the harm caused by this continued growth. Our focus should be on protection of resources and the livability of residents. I'm very concerned about the future direction of Charleston. From Rob Williams at 734 Goodlet Circle. After reading the recent article in the Post and Courier about revitalizing King Street, I have the following recommendation to be discussed during your planning meeting. Close King Street from Calhoun to Broad for motorized vehicles from 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. daily. During a visit to the city of Cork, Ireland, I witnessed a dramatic increase in commerce in the inner city Main Street, which was closed to auto and truck traffic from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. All deliveries were made to the local businesses prior to those hours. Start a trial for 1 month, not 1 day, during the peak of tourist season. And finally, from Dory Long of James Island. First, any recommendations related to advancing or supporting the extension of Interstate 526 across Johns and James Island should be removed. Instead, less expensive projects that enhance equitable mobility and don't harm cultural and natural resources should be supported. Examples include the Maybank pitchforks on Johns Island and additional low country rapid transit lines for West Ashley and James Island that expand upon the initial spine along Rivers Avenue that is currently in development. Second, please encourage planning commissioners to designate the area of the Cainhoy Peninsula north of Clements Ferry Road as a rural area. That change will help protect the approximately 4,500 acres of freshwater wetlands and longleaf pine forests that are home to threatened and endangered species, as well as irreplaceable cultural resources, including those of the Jack Primus community.
Thank you, Chloe. That'll close the public aspect of this part of the meeting. And before we move on to commission members for questions and comments, I'd ask Mr. Morgan or anyone from his staff that they'd like, if they have any comments on any of the speakers or the written comments. If not, that's okay too. I just wanted to ask.
Sure. I had a couple of notes. Mr. Zlogar had a question about the rural areas and 1 unit an acre. The reality is that Charleston County, which kind of worked with us to set up the urban growth boundary since the very beginning on that, they have allowed outside of UGB up to 1 unit an acre, and that was in all our previous plans that we've had for UGB that have involved the UGB, and they've continued here. We actually, don't recommend, of course, anything but denser than 1 unit an acre if it is outside the UGB, and of course we don't annex anything that's outside the UGB. So I think that we're still honoring the whole character of the UGB. Nothing has really changed there is what I'm saying. This is not a zoning ordinance. Conservation zoning is an option for areas that are outside the UGB, and that's 1 unit to every acre and a half. And again, we aren't annexing other areas out there. Any zonings that are greater than 1 unit an acre are pre-existing to before the UGB even existed. And I know, even though it's been around for 20 years, we've got some zoning on the ground outside the UGB that's denser than that, but that is something that's been in place for several decades. In reference to, I've got a couple of slides I can kind of go into if you all wanted more detail on the Cainhoy issue. Is there any interest in the commissioners and discussion on the Cainhoy comments we heard?
Commission members?
I'm seeing you. Okay, so I'm going to go to a screen share on this, and I'll also have a couple of slides in reference to the city center comments that we got too. Let me go to share screen. Let me find this. Where did I put them? Now I'm going to have fun finding them. Okay, where did they go? That's the recommendations. I'm not. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to minimize and find it. I'm sorry to have to dig through this. Where are these? it's doing fun things here. Here we go. Okay, there we are. And I can go here. You'd think with a year and a half of Zoom under my belt, I wouldn't have. Okay, here we go. So are you all seeing a Cainhoy map now in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Colors and things like that?
Yes.
So just for clarification, in the Cainhoy area, of course, this is the recommended area along Clements Ferry Road for city center. And then this is the area that's recommended for suburban. And then this is the area that's recommended for suburban edge. We don't have rural areas anywhere in this plan that are inside the UGB. So because this whole area is inside the UGB, it would not have a rural designation. That's just one of the principles that's been in this plan, as well as our previous two plans that have involved the UGB. So rural is typically outside the UGB, and there hasn't been a proposal to change the UGB here. It's also important to note that we are dealing with, of course, PUD and a development agreement that allows the densities and types of development that is coming in the Cainhoy development. But it's also important to note, and let's see if we can start moving the slides here. So the area that is city center is within about a half mile to quarter mile of Clements Ferry Road here. And then there's an area of the suburban category that's about 1.25 miles deep. There are lots of wetland areas in here. You know, this is an area that would not necessarily be all developed anyway because of the wetland areas, because of commitments the owners have made to preserve areas of old growth pine. You know, it's really kind of about balance. You know, there is going to be some development here, and I'm going to kind of show you another slide that is part of our justification for the development here, but then there's also going to be preservation of areas too. So we think it's balancing development and these preservation needs out here is kind of what this plan is doing. But this is the image from Wagner and Ball's study, same scale here, and you see how much of this area is the high ground. And so this was a big part of the reason that in the plan we designated greater densities out here, because there is so much high ground. And you might remember when we were talking about elevation-based land use recommendations, we were trying to get away from the lower areas. And in fact, out here in Cainhoy, our recommendations are getting away from some of these lower areas, but concentrating the development more in the high ground. Now, the Wagner and Ball folks don't say build on every square inch of high ground. Of course, you need areas for filtration, and you want to keep some of that canopy and those good soils and all that. But we think what we've got in the plan is a pretty good area of balance. So that was kind of our explanation as to how we came up with those, and it's balancing the PUD and the development interests that are already in place with the city's need to grow in an area like this because it is such high elevations. And we do have another image here that shows the elevations. You know, this is some of the highest land in the city, you know, 25 feet plus. So talk about areas that are going to be immune to climate change for decades and decades and decades. This is an area that would be. So, you know, there is some logic to that as well. So this is kind of what I wanted to show you in the Cainhoy area. And then we've got some images now into the downtown.
Can we go back to that and ask questions?
Absolutely, absolutely. This slide?
Yeah, Miss Jacobs had her hand up, so I'll let, she's following the rules. She can go first.
Miss Jacobs, you go ahead.
And I may be jumping in on the same question, Mr. Bailey. Can you illustrate on one of these maps, Christopher, the outline of these PUD development agreements across this land use? Because I think that's most important for the community to see, is that, you know, the recommendations of this area is based on a global look of the city, but also in consideration with land use and PUD agreements and development agreements that already exist on, I think, from what I understand, a large portion of this land. Is there a way do you have readily available something that could show us that, or you could just trace it for these several people?
I don't have it at the same scale, but I can tell you from knowledge of it and having worked with it for a number of years, the greatest densities in those PUDs are in these areas in general.
Right, but I'm talking about the border of the PUD. Like, how far does this PUD go across this land use?
Well, it goes all through here. In other words, if you can you all see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay. It includes all this area in here, and then it comes back around here. Some of this is in other development agreements, but then it includes this site, and then all the way down here, and all the way up here, and up along this creek, and then all the way over to Jack Primus.
So basically, and this is for, my understanding as a new commissioner, as well as these several of the citizens that have, commented, written in, called in, this land is already committed by a PUD or a development agreement at some level.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's most important for everyone to understand. So thank you for that.
Mr. Bailey, you have anything to add?
That was exactly my question.
Okay. Great minds think alike.
Okay. All right.
Morgan, you go ahead.
Response to the comments about the downtown designations. So this is the downtown Charleston area. And of course, the dark red is what we call our city centers. In the past, it was comparable to urban core is what we called it. And some of that is planner marketing, let's call it that. Because really some plans do things like they do, land use area 1, land use area 2, and they don't kind of try to personify it in ways that we were trying to do here. But I hope that people are not confusing the phrase city center with central business district. They are completely different. Central business district is a kind of business term and kind of center of the city term that every community has. And, none of this would change what is the central business district. These categories are about intensity of use. And so city center is the most intense category in the plan. And we felt that when we looked at downtown, and I'm going to zoom in on that. So this is the lower area of downtown. You've got the Charlestown neighborhood, the Charleston Village area, French Quarter, and Ansonboro. When we looked at where height districts are over here, if you look at this, all of this area of downtown is fairly low height districts, with the one exception of about 50 feet in from King Street and about 50 feet in from Meeting Street. There is a small area of 6-story, which has a couple of 6-story buildings in it. I think it's called Liberty Center here. And then the hotel, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of the hotel at the corner of Queen and Queen and Meeting.
The Mills House.
Mills House, thank you. Ding, 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 that's the winner. The Mills House Hotel. So those are two buildings that are a little bit taller. And of course, when you're on Broad Street, the People's Building, which is a historic structure. But when we think about what development might occur in this area in the coming years, we think about like where there are vacant lots, because all these buildings are historic buildings and things, they aren't going to be torn down. But there are vacant lots, particularly parking lots, surface parking lots, things like that. And our concern was that if this area stayed in our city center area, that would encourage greater heights and greater densities on some surface lots that might not be as appropriate for that in the context of all these other historic buildings. Again, it's not about changing what is the central business district of our city. It's about where the greatest intensity is. And we felt that on King and Meeting from Charleston Place up, which is a fairly intense development, and then all the things you get around College of Charleston, and then going all the way up King Street, those were the right areas to be in that kind of city center area. And they were also had proximity. This is a very, very important part about this, to the Low Country Rapid Transit. They're within about a half mile, a 5 or 10 minute walk of the Low Country Rapid Transit. And we were trying to make sure that everything, particularly on the peninsula, that was within a 5-minute walk of that, and that was not already part of a context of a neighborhood, was in city center, and where we had neighborhoods, things like that we were staying away from that. So that was what it was about. It was about level of intensity. It was not trying to change the central business district or anything like that. You might notice also that, like West Edge is included. I don't know if, most people who define the central business district would say West Edge is part of it, but it is an area of intense development because of the Low Country Rapid Transit and its proximity to MUSC and things like that. And that is a completely different environment from what Broad Street is, from what Lower King and Lower Meeting is. And so that's a kind of roundabout explanation on that issue. And happy to answer further questions about that.
All right. Any other comments, Mr. Morgan?
That's it.
You good? Thank you. So the way I think I'd like to handle this is, and you'll chime in, is we have recommendations that are printed out that were sent to us. We discussed a couple of them. I think we have discussed number 16 under, excuse me, under transportation pretty well. And I think we agreed on, and Chloe made some notes on it. Can we just go through, starting with page 1 under engagement, either 5 or 6? Is any concerns on those changes?
Would y'all like me to screen share again with those? Okay. Let's go back to this. Now have
And that's
shoot.
Chris, you do pretty well, man, I tell you.
I'm having fun today with my screen share. Sorry, let me get back to this. I don't know where this thing ended up, that it disappeared on me. Here we go. Okay.
So 5 and 6.
Here we go.
Great. So let's talk about 5 and 6, see if anybody has any concerns or any other changes on those two, and let's knock those out. There was
I'll go ahead and put a motion on the table to approve, and then we can discuss it.
Okay, is that 5 and 6 under
And
engagement, Mr.
engagement section.
I'll second Harry's motion.
Okay, Ms. Jacobs will second that. And what I'm going to do is, these would be, yeah, we can do a roll call vote on each of these, but anyway, any discussion on these two? Any concerns with them? If not, can we have just a mutual agreement? These are good without doing a roll call vote. I'd hate to do a roll call vote on all of them. If we're taking at the end, we'll do a roll call vote if there's any controversy. Is all commission members good with those 5 and 6 under engagement?
I'll add my motion that we've approved this by acclamation.
Great, thank you.
And I'll second that.
Great, and I'll take a voice. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Great. That's it. That worked pretty well. Okay, so now we'll go to under natural resources, and we're under number 5 and 7. Any concerns or motion under those two? Hearing no concerns.
I will make a motion to approve.
Great. Mr. Lassane makes a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Great. Ms. Johnson, under natural resources, the changes. If there's no other discussion, again, we'll just do a roll call with a voice. Everyone in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Appreciate it. So now we'll go to cultural resources, and we have, I'm sorry, we have cultural resources. We have number 7, number 10, and number 12. Any concerns with any of those? If not,
I'll make a motion. And Mr. Chairman, just for process's sake, if we're going to do the voice vote, for the record, you might ask for nay votes in case there is a nay vote.
good call, Mr. Lassane. I appreciate it. There's a motion by Mr. Lassane that we're okay with number 7. Excuse me, under
7, 10, and 12.
Great, under natural resources.
I'll second that.
And Ms. Jacobs second. Any comments? If not, we'll ask all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, the record stands as no one opposed. Under economic development, we have a couple of changes. Number 2, under item 2, item 5, item 8, and item, excuse me, 14 and 16. Any comments on any of those?
Mr. Chairman, I would, the only issue I have with any of these is when we, then as Mr. Bailey stated earlier in the meeting, where they're prescriptive rather than suggesting. for example, since it's up on the screen now, number 16 says, establish a task force to update the city's tourism management plan. I don't have any issue with this. I think this is a good suggestion, but my only issue with it is that we're saying establish a task force. I think we should allow the city to proceed with updating the city's tourism management plan in the way they see best fit. I'm not comfortable with the planning commission telling them. So I would just strike establish a task force.
Can we add the word in front? Consider adding establish.
I would just say my motion would be to approve this language as written, with the exception of striking the language establish a task force too.
Okay. I'm on board with that. I think that keeps the spirit of what needs to be done.
So it sounds like there's a motion that we approve everything on economic development, with the exception of 16, that we strike those words, establish a task force. And Ms. Johnson's in second of that. Am I correct? Any other questions, considerations on those items? For those items under
Charlie, I feel like on the prior page, one of those was somewhat prescriptive as well.
Okay. It must have been on.
Can we go back to on the screen?
Yeah, that an economic development.
Number 2.
Maybe dedicate, where it says dedicate staff and resources, maybe.
Office of Economic Development. Yeah, that I agree with you, Mr. Bailey. How would you like to?
Is that the same as number 4, where you say partner with? Because that would be prescriptive as well, right?
I think going back to what I said originally, if we could, and we don't have to do this now, but if we could maybe make a blanket statement to just use the same wording in any of these items that should not be prescriptive. I don't know what that is right now, but I think if we are consistent with our wording, that will help this situation. Otherwise, we're going to go back through all these and reevaluate them.
Yeah, I hear you, but we don't have that many more to go, but
I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and I think perhaps number 2 and number 4, we should just add the words that we see above in number 12 on this same page, reevaluate the feasibility of, and just say evaluate the feasibility of dedicating resources, evaluate the feasibility of partnering with Trident Tech, and so forth.
I'm good with that.
Yep. And I think that puts it in them we'd like them to look at it, but it doesn't say they have to. Okay. Are we all on page with that?
And Mr. Chairman, I will amend my motion to include this the substance of this discussion.
I'm making note of that, but there are multiple other instances not under review tonight, previous recommendations that have not been discussed that use the language dedicate staff and resources, or some very similar language to that. Are you also motioning to make that change to all instances where that language is used?
I am not. I think it's restricted to only those items we've discussed.
Yeah, some of them we discussed at the original meeting, I believe. So I think it's anything that would change.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that
Well,
clarification.
but then I do think we need to clarify, because I think it was Erica brought up one that was not one of the ones that we're discussing tonight.
I wasn't, and I'm not bringing that one up. I'm not bringing that one up for the purposes of saying, well, here's, maybe we need to reevaluate that. I'm saying that a lot of the verbs that are being used in here seem prescriptive, as opposed to, this is rather than suggestive. And so I think maybe what we look at is, just an overall catch-all sentence, that describes all the recommendations, saying, while some of these may seem prescriptive, these are just our suggestions for how the city and city council and city planning department should proceed in the next 10 years. Essentially that's what we're doing. We're making recommendations. And these are things that we would like to see, but we know that we can't prescribe them.
I think I believe Mr. Lassane's last comment would probably cover that, I think.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
We're having a workshop with with the city council subsequent to this review tonight if we pass it. And I think those are the part of that discussion where we could, reflect our sentiment in that regard.
Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, I hear you, and that would give us the opportunity to clarify anything. So, Mr. Lassane.
And I appreciate Ms. Harrison's comment, and I think that is a very good suggestion. And I think as we move the plan towards City Council, and perhaps that is a suggestion we add at City Council, my motion is restricted only to this section that we've been discussing. And Christopher, you can move the slide back one to page 3. This would apply to item number 2, item number 4, and then if you will go to page 4 to item number 16, as we've already discussed. Just to clarify my motion here for everyone.
I agree with that. I think it was seconded, but I agree with that.
Are we waiting for a
vote on that motion?
I'm sorry, yeah. So let's go ahead and take a vote on that, and I'll ask anyone opposed. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to that? Okay, thank you. So now we're at, I believe we're at,
Transportation.
yeah. Sorry, I'm a little lost there, turn some pages. So we're now at
Transportation.
transportation. And we've got,
I'm gonna go to page 5 because there's
Yep.
nothing on page 4 on
I
transportation.
think there's a 16 where we talked about this a good bit, and I think we discussed this a little bit. And is there a motion on that? I think we talked about, Mr. Lassane talked about adding the separation, and also, and well as possibly incentivizing. Ms. Lempus is discussing incentivizing for developers to do that work.
And I believe Ms. Johnson's comments about the separation from vehicular traffic are also.
Right, that as well, I'm sorry, yes. So those 3 things we discussed, the separation of pedestrian bike, pedestrian and traffic, and as well as possible incentivizing for developers to implement those things. We okay with that, with 16, with that change? I'm gonna ask for a motion.
I move to approve.
Great, thank you, Ms. Harrison. Second?
I'll second this motion.
Ms. Jacobs, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so we'll go to community facilities and priority investments.
Yep.
And there's one item, I think it's number 9. Any concerns with that?
Mr. Chairman, I will have to say that this one does give me a concern for the same
Okay.
reason. I believe that the Capital Projects Division does great work with the resources that they have, and I believe that this is the job of the mayor, this is a division of a department of the city of Charleston that we're sort of directing the mayor to research and evaluate. If I'm not mistaken, this was done in 2016. The city did an efficiency study of the entire city government operation. And I just think this is outside of the scope of the role of the Planning Commission.
I think in the city plan, it sounds like we're micromanaging somebody, but anyway, any comments on this?
I agree with Mr. Lissane's comments.
All right, so you would, Harry, basically you would say, and again, I'm not going to cut anyone off, because someone obviously might have this recommendation. If they'd like to comment, please speak up. You're saying we implement, that we pass the aspect without number 9, correct?
Yeah, and I guess, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to disapprove this addition to the plan, number 9.
Okay, so we approve everything with the exception of number 9, right?
And I'll second that.
Okay, Ms. Johnson seconds. Any other comments? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Yes,
I
sir.
want to clarify my motion that we approve all of the items under this section with the exception of number 8.
Number 8?
Number 9.
Sorry, number 9.
Number 9.
Yes,
Yeah.
number 9.
Yeah, with the exception 9. I'm with you. And that, Ms. Johnson, you're fine with the way clarified? Great, thank you. All in favor of that, please say aye.
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 Great. Anyone opposed to that? Okay, thank you. Under housing, we've got under number 7, we've got a change, and number 10.
And number 2 as well.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Yep, number 2. Yeah, there's 3 words there.
So you got that, and then.
And I think that, when you say under number 2, you say strongly encourages, that makes sense the way you say it. So you're encouraging, it's not saying you're doing something, so. Any concerns with any of those? If not, is there a motion that we approve those?
I move that we approve this section as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Lassane. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Great.
Aye.
Anyone? Great, thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay, under land use, one change to number 9.
Number 13. Number 13.
I apologize. Yes, I'm sorry. Number 13. Any concerns with that number 13?
I'll move that we approve this section as amended by adding number 13.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. Second?
Second.
Great, Mr. Bailey, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. And is there anyone opposed? Thank you. Equity and resilience. We got number 3 and number 12. Any concerns with the changes? If not, is there a motion to approve the changes that were given to us?
I did have one question about the downtown plan. Christopher, I was looking on our city plan website. Is the downtown plan, I didn't see it, but maybe it just might have been an oversight. I know it's been referenced in the past, and I think that plan's from almost early, not 1997, but
1999.
I won't tell you how young I was. If I graduated high school in 97, that tells you how long ago that plan was made.
You're still very young, I can tell you that. I know that much. You're young.
I mean, I just is it really, do we need to update the plan, or do we need to just do a brand new plan for downtown? I mean, 1999, 2021.
I think in our minds, update means, completely redo it. I mean, there's still some relevant items in there, but for instance, it looked at downtown as just being up to the Septima Clark Parkway. And, these days downtown includes things all the way up in Nomo and all that. It didn't really look at the perimeter protection issues that we're now working with for downtown. It didn't look at the water issues. It didn't look at, as much into the tourism stuff as we probably might need to do. So, it's a complete rewrite, no doubt.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Can we get a motion to approve as given to us the equity and resilience items? Ms. Harrison, can I pick on you? Make a move.
I move to approve.
I thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone that's opposed to that item? Great, thank you. So now let's do with what we just talked about, what we passed on each individual section. Can we get a motion to approve the plan? Again, Chloe has all the details of what we went through on each section. Approve the plan with our individual section recommendations implemented.
Mr. Chairman, can I clarify, is this what you're saying is the entire plan document that you would be making motions to endorse the entire plan document on to city council? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. On with the changes we've discussed tonight and voted on tonight. Yes, sir. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Jacobs, is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
All right. I don't know who seconded first, so I don't want to cut anybody off. Ms. Brian Jenkins, was that you?
It could have been.
All right. All right. Well, I'm going to take you as that. I know it was you and Mr. Lassane, but I'm a little slow on this. So motion by Ms. Jacobs, second by Ms. Brian Jenkins. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Bailey?
I in favor.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Bryant Jenkins?
Aye, in favor.
Great. Ms. Harrison?
Aye, in favor.
Thank you. Ms. Jacobs?
Aye, in favor.
Ms. Johnson?
I in favor.
Ms. Lampasas?
Aye, in favor.
Great. Mr. Lassane?
I in favor.
And I don't think Mr. Flug, I don't think he's with us today. Is that correct, Chloe? Yeah, okay. And I'm in favor as well. So that would be 8 in favor and none opposed. Folks, I appreciate your patience tonight and I appreciate everyone's work and the staff's work on all of this. And I think I look forward to us meeting with City Council to talk about it and give our thoughts as well. So that'd be a fun meeting as well. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Wrote a plan.
Yeah. Ms. Jacobs, you go ahead.
There were a couple of things that were said during this process that I might recommend that you, as the chairman of our commission, write a bit of a cover letter to the city council that brought this forward to them, especially with our conversation about the no growth, the description about how we're using the words in front of our recommendation. So it sort of points them in some directions that we may have in our workshop. So I might recommend that you would write a cover letter to the council, sort of outlining the guiding principles, giving the highlights of what we've talked about.
I'll be glad to do that. What I'll do is do that and then send all of you a draft of that so that we're all on the same page. See, make sure everyone agrees with that, what I put on pen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
Good alert. We did get notification from the clerk's office today that they would like to get the plans to the council members because the workshop is next Wednesday, starting at 2 p.m. And they would like to get plans to the council members. So we're probably needing to ship those out tomorrow with the changes that you all have made today. I don't know, Charlie, if you would have time to get such a letter out tomorrow. We'd be happy to help you facilitate that if that's possible.
Yeah, we'll talk about that after the meeting, and I may push Ms. Jacobs a little bit for her help as well. She's always helpful. So anyway, thank you.
Happy to do
Makes
that.
sense. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Anyone have anything else? If not, I appreciate it.
Are we having a Zoom meeting or a live meeting with council?
Zoom, I believe, correct, Chris?
Zoom, the mayor has said Zoom. All the council committees are still meeting by Zoom. It's only when it's the full council. Not that we won't possibly have the full council in our workshop, but the logistics are still tough for them to do other meetings beyond just the council meetings.
And 2 o'clock for Zoom may be easier for a lot of folks right now anyway. I mean, everybody's all over the place, so.
And they're going to have a special council meeting probably after our meeting. So probably 3:30, 4 o'clock, they're going to have to go off to a special short agenda council meeting. So just FYI.
Thank you. If there's no other questions or comments, I appreciate everyone's time. We've had several extra meetings on this, and I think it was well worthwhile. So thank you everyone for your time, and y'all have a good evening and a good week, the rest of your week.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank